My sister called to let me know that we needed to go to my grandmother's house. She said she got a call from my uncle and he asked the three of us